Human beings are naturally connected to one another. No one is born completely independent. From the very first moment of life, we rely on others for care, guidance, and survival. This connection is not a weakness. It is a part of being human. But there is a hidden line between connection and dependence. A line so thin that most people do not even realize when they cross it. Dependence does not arrive loudly. It does not announce itself as a problem. Instead, it grows quietly inside daily habits, choices, and emotions. At first, it feels safe. It feels comforting to rely on someone else for decisions, for approval, for direction. It feels easier to let others guide your path. But slowly something begins to change you. Stop listening to your own thoughts. You stop trusting your own decisions. You begin to shape your identity based on others' expectations. Without realizing it, you start losing yourself. This loss is not sudden. It happens step by step, choice by choice, moment by moment. A person who once had clear dreams begins to feel confused. A person who once spoke with confidence begins to hesitate. A person who once knew who they were begins to question their own identity. More you depend on people, the more your inner voice becomes silent. This is the reality many people live without understanding. They believe they are supported, but in truth, they are slowly becoming dependent. Support helps you grow stronger. Dependence makes you weaker. This difference defines whether you become your true self or lose it. In this journey, we will explore how dependence develops, how it affects your identity, emotions, and decisions, and how you can break free from it. Through real-life examples and honest reflections, you will begin to understand the hidden cost of relying too much on others, and more importantly, you will discover the power of standing on your own. Because at the end of the day, your life is yours to live, your decisions are yours to make, and your identity is yours to protect. If you lose yourself in others, you may gain temporary comfort, but you lose something far more valuable. You lose who you truly are. Chapter 1. Beginning of dependence. Every journey of dependence starts in a place that feels normal and harmless. No one decides one day that they will lose themselves. It begins in small ways that seem natural. As a child, you depend on your parents for everything, for food, for protection, for learning how to live. This stage is necessary, because without it, survival is not possible. But growth is meant to change this condition. As time passes, a person is expected to slowly build independence, to think, to decide, to understand right and wrong, to develop a sense of self. The problem begins when this natural dependence does not reduce. Instead, it grows stronger in different forms. At a young age, a boy named Hassan always followed his older brother. He copied his style, his choices, his way of speaking. At first, it looked like admiration. Everyone around him praised the bond, but Hassan never developed his own preferences. When asked what he liked, he would look at his brother before answering. He was not living his own life. He was living a borrowed version of someone else. This is how dependence quietly begins. It hides behind admiration. It hides behind love. It hides behind trust, but slowly it takes away individuality. As a person grows older, the sources of dependence change. It may shift from parents to friends, from friends to relationships, from relationships to society. A student named Imran always asked his friends before making decisions which subjects to choose, which career to follow, even which opinions to hold. Believed this made him smart because he was taking advice. But there was a difference. He did not understand advice. Guide's dependence controls. Imran stopped thinking deeply for himself. He stopped questioning his own desires. His mind became trained to look outward instead of inward. This is where the loss truly begins. Dependence also grows through fear of making mistakes, fear of being judged, fear of standing alone. A girl named Hira wanted to pursue art, but her family preferred a different path. Instead of trusting her passion, she followed their expectations. At first, it felt safe. She avoided conflict. She gained approval, but inside she felt empty. She was living a life that did not belong to her. This is the hidden cost of dependence. It gives temporary comfort, but slowly takes away long-term fulfillment. Another form of early dependence appears through emotional attachment. When a person depends on someone else for happiness, they give away control over their emotions. A young man named Saad felt happy only when his friends included him. If they ignored him, he felt worthless. His mood was not his own. It was controlled by others' actions. This pattern becomes dangerous with time because life is unpredictable. People change, situations change. If your stability depends on others, you will always feel uncertain. The beginning of dependence is often invisible. It does not look like weakness. It looks like connection. It looks like trust. It looks like belonging. But true connection allows growth. True trust builds strength. Dependence does the opposite. It slowly replaces your voice with someone else's. It slowly replaces your choices with someone else's decisions. And the most dangerous part is that many people never realize it. They believe they are supported, but in reality, they are becoming dependent. Understanding this beginning is important because you cannot break a pattern you do not recognize. The moment you become aware of where your dependence starts, you take the first step toward reclaiming yourself. Every independent thought, every personal decision, no matter how small, is a step back to your true identity, and that is where real growth begins. Chapter 2. The silent loss of identity. Losing yourself does not happen in a loud or dramatic way. It does not come with warning signs that are easy to notice. It happens quietly, so quietly, that a person continues living without realizing what is being lost. At first, everything seems normal. You still talk with others. You still make decisions. You still move forward in life. But something inside begins to fade. Your thoughts are no longer fully your own. Your choices begin to reflect others. Your personality slowly adjusts to fit expectations. Is the silent loss of identity. Young woman named Amina always valued the opinions of her friends. Whenever she wanted to choose something, she would ask them first what to wear, where to go, what to believe. At first, it felt like closeness and trust. She believed this was how strong friendships worked, but over time, something changed. When she was alone, she felt confused. She could not decide simple things. She felt uncomfortable trusting her own judgment. It was as if her inner voice had disappeared. This is how identity fades, not in one moment, but through repeated dependence. Another example is of a man named Farhan. Farhan always tried to please his family. Every decision he made was based on their approval. He chose his career based on their expectations. He shaped his lifestyle according to their preferences. Outwardly, everything looked successful. He had stability and respect. Inside, he felt disconnected. He often wondered why he felt empty, despite having everything. The answer was simple. He was living a life designed by others. When a person constantly seeks approval, they begin to measure their worth through others' reactions. People agree, they feel confident. If people disagree, they feel insecure. This creates a fragile identity because it is not built on self-understanding. It is built on external validation. A student named Nida experienced this deeply. She always waited for her teachers and classmates to confirm her abilities. If someone praised her, she felt capable. If someone criticized her, she felt like a failure. Her confidence was not stable. It depended on others. This is the danger of losing your identity. You become like a mirror, reflecting what others expect, but never showing your true self. Another hidden sign of identity loss is constant comparison. When you depend on others, you start comparing yourself with them. You begin to think, am I good enough? Am I doing the right thing? Am I accepted? These thoughts slowly replace your natural confidence. A boy named Daniel always compared himself with his friends, their achievements, their style, their popularity, instead of focusing on his own growth. Tried to match others. In this process, he lost his uniqueness. He forgot what made him different. Identity is built through self-awareness. through understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your values. But dependence shifts your focus outward. You stop exploring yourself. You start observing others. This is where the loss becomes deeper. You may still have a name, a role, a place in society, but your true self becomes unclear. The most painful part is that many people feel this emptiness, but cannot explain it. They feel disconnected. They feel uncertain. They feel incomplete, but they do not realize that the root cause is dependence. Silent loss of identity is dangerous because it feels normal. People around you may not notice it. You may not notice it, but its effects appear in your confidence, your decisions, and your emotions. The more you depend on others, the more you move away from who you truly are. But awareness changes everything. The moment you start questioning your choices, the moment you begin to listen to your inner voice again, you begin the process of rediscovering your self-identity is never fully lost. It is only hidden beneath layers of dependence, and with conscious effort, it can always be found again. Chapter 3. Illusion of support. Not everything that feels like support is truly helping you grow. Sometimes what appears to be support is actually dependence in disguise. This illusion is one of the most dangerous parts of human relationships, because it makes weakness feel like strength and control feel like care. A person often believes they are supported, when in reality they are becoming dependent. The difference is subtle but powerful. Real support encourages independence. False support creates reliance. A young man named Kareem believed his best friend was his biggest support system. His friend always told him what to do, which decisions to make, how to handle situations. Kareem felt safe because he did not have to think too much. He trusted his friend completely, but over time, something changed. Whenever his friend was not around, Kareem felt lost. He could not make decisions on his own. He felt anxious and unsure. This is when support turns into dependence, because true support prepares you to stand alone. It does not make you unable to function without someone another. Example is of a girl named Mac. She was in a relationship where her partner guided every part of her life. What to wear, who to talk to, how to behave at. First she believed this was care. She thought someone paying this much attention meant love. But slowly she realized she had no personal space, no independent choices, no freedom to be herself. Her life was controlled. This is not support. This is dependence, created through emotional control. The illusion becomes stronger when emotions are involved, when someone provides comfort during difficult times. It is natural to feel attached, but attachment can turn into reliance. A student named Salman depended on his mentor for motivation. Whenever the mentor encouraged him, he worked hard. Whenever the mentor was absent, he lost focus. His progress depended on someone else's presence. This shows a hidden weakness, because true motivation should come from within. External encouragement is helpful, but it should not be the only source of strength. Another form of illusion appears in families. Parents often make decisions for their children out of care, but if this continues for too long, it prevents the child from developing independence. A boy named Usama always had his parents deciding everything for him, from education to daily routines. He never faced the challenge of making choices. When he grew older and had to make decisions on his own, he felt confused and overwhelmed. This is how excessive support weakens a person. It removes the opportunity to grow. The illusion of support also appears in friendships. Some friends keep others dependent by always taking control. They speak on their behalf. They decide plans. They lead every situation. At first it feels comfortable, but it slowly creates imbalance. One person becomes dominant, the other becomes dependent. Boy named Zubair always relied on his friend to handle social situations. His friend spoke confidently, made decisions, took the lead. Zubair stayed in the background. Over time, he lost confidence in his own abilities. He believed he could not handle situations alone. This belief was not real. It was created by dependence. The illusion of support is dangerous because it feels positive, it feels like connection, it feels like care, it feels like safety, but in reality, it reduces your strength. True support gives you space to think, to decide, to grow. It allows you to make mistakes because mistakes are necessary for learning. False support removes that space. It makes you comfortable in weakness. Key difference is simple. If someone is truly supporting you, you will feel stronger when they are not around. If someone is creating dependence, you will feel weaker without them understanding. This difference is important because many people stay in dependent situations believing they are supported, do not realize that their growth is being limited. Breaking this illusion requires awareness. You must ask yourself, am I growing stronger? Or am I becoming more dependent? Do I feel capable alone? Or do I feel lost without others? These questions reveal the truth. Support should empower you, not control you. Moment you recognize the illusion, you take a step toward real independence, and that is where true strength begins. Chapter 4: Fear of being alone. One of the strongest forces behind dependence is fear. Not fear of failure, not fear of struggle, but fear of being alone. This fear is deep and often hidden. Many people do not even realize that their dependence is driven by it. Being alone forces a person to face themselves, to face their thoughts, their weaknesses, their uncertainties. And for many, this feels uncomfortable, so they choose dependence instead. A young man named Arslan always surrounded himself with people, friends, family, colleagues. He was never alone. At first, it looked like he was social and well-connected, but the truth was different. Whenever he was alone, he felt restless. He did not know what to do with his own thoughts. He felt empty, so he kept himself busy with others. This is how fear creates dependence instead of building inner strength. A person escapes into constant connection. Another example is of a girl named Sana. Sana stayed in a friendship where she was not respected, her opinions were ignored, her feelings were dismissed, but she continued to stay. Why? Because she was afraid of losing that connection. She believed that being alone would be worse than being disrespected. This fear kept her trapped. Fear of being alone often leads people to accept less than they deserve. They tolerate unhealthy relationships. They ignore their own needs. They sacrifice their self-respect all to avoid loneliness. A boy named Hamid experienced this in his daily life. Always agreed with his friends, even when he disagreed internally. He laughed when they laughed. He followed when they decided. Never expressed his true thoughts because he feared rejection. He believed that if he showed his real self, he might be left alone. This fear slowly erased his individuality. Being alone is often misunderstood. People think it means isolation or weakness, but in reality, it is a powerful state. It is in solitude that a person understands themselves, without external noise, without influence, without pressure. You begin to hear your own voice. A student named Ariba decided to spend time alone. At first it felt uncomfortable. She was used to constant interaction. But slowly she began to understand her thoughts, her preferences, her goals. She discovered parts of herself that were hidden. This is the positive side of being alone. It builds self-awareness. Fear of loneliness also creates emotional dependence. When a person believes they need someone else to feel complete, they give away control of their happiness. A man named Fahad felt happy only when he was with others. If he was ignored or left out, he felt broken. His emotional state depended on others' presence. This created instability because people are not constant. They have their own lives, their own priorities. If your happiness depends on them, you will always feel uncertain. Another hidden effect of this fear is over-attachment. People become too attached too quickly. They invest all their emotions into one person. They expect constant attention, constant support, and when this expectation is not met, they feel hurt and disappointed. This cycle repeats. Root cause remains the same: fear of being alone. But the truth is simply you cannot build strong relationships if you are afraid of solitude, because fear creates need, and need creates dependence. Strong relationships are built by strong individuals, people who are comfortable with themselves. People who can stand alone. Being alone does not mean being lonely. Loneliness is a feeling of emptiness. Being alone is a state of independence. They are not the same. When you learn to be comfortable alone, you remove the fear, and when fear is removed, dependence begins to disappear. You no longer stay in situations that harm you. You no longer seek constant validation. You no longer shape yourself to avoid rejection. Instead, you become stable. A person who is not afraid of being alone has the power to choose the right relationships. They stay because they want to, not because they need to. This is true freedom. Fear keeps you dependent. Courage makes you independent, and courage begins with one simple step: learning to sit with yourself without fear. That is where real strength is born. Chapter 5: Loss of Decision-Making Power. One of the most serious consequences of dependence is the gradual loss of decision-making ability. At first, this loss is not noticeable. It feels like you are simply taking advice or listening to others, but slowly a pattern forms. You begin to rely on others not just for guidance, but for final choices. You start waiting for approval before taking action. You hesitate when you are alone. This is where your power begins to fade. A young boy named Taha always asked his parents before doing anything. From small daily choices to important life decisions, which subjects to study, which friends to spend time with, what goals to set, his parents guided him with good intentions. They wanted the best for him, but Taha never developed the habit of thinking for himself. Years passed, and he grew older. Now he faced situations where no one was there to guide him. Simple decisions became stressful. He felt confused and unsure. This is the effect of long-term dependence. Decision-making is a skill, and like every skill, it needs practice. Without practice, it becomes weak. Another example is of a girl named Rabia. Rabia depended on her friends for almost everything. They planned, she followed. When they decided, she agreed. She believed this kept harmony in her relationships, but over time, she lost clarity about her own preferences. One day, her friends asked her what she wanted. For the first time, she had no answer. She realized she had never truly decided for herself. This is how dependence slowly removes your ability to choose. It trains your mind to look outward instead of inward. Decision making is not just about choosing between options. It is about understanding yourself, your values, your priorities, your goals. When you depend on others, you disconnect from this understanding. A man named Junaid faced this challenge in his career. Always followed the advice of others. He chose his field based on what people suggested. He changed his direction based on others' opinions. After years of effort, he felt dissatisfied. He realized that none of his decisions were truly his own. He had been following paths chosen by others. This creates a deep sense of regret, because life decisions shape your future. If they are not aligned with your true self, they lead to frustration. Another hidden effect of losing decision-making power is fear. When you are not used to making choices, every decision feels risky. You become afraid of making mistakes. A student named Hamid experienced this during an important moment. He had to choose between two opportunities. Both required independent thinking, but he hesitated. Delayed, he asked multiple people for advice instead of gaining clarity. He became more confused. In the end, he missed both opportunities. This shows how dependence limits growth, because opportunities often require quick and confident decisions. If you are always waiting for guidance, you fall behind. Decision-making also builds confidence. Each choice you make teaches you something. If the result is good, you gain trust in yourself. If the result is not as expected, you gain experience. Outcomes are valuable, but when you avoid making decisions, you lose both confidence and experience. A young woman named Ikra decided to change this pattern. She started with small decisions: what to eat, to spend her time, what activities to pursue. At First she felt uncertain, but slowly she began to trust herself. Her confidence grew. She realized that making mistakes was not failure. It was learning. This is the key to regaining decision-making power. Start small, be patient, accept imperfection. Another important point is understanding the role of advice. Advice is valuable. It provides perspective, but it should not replace your own judgment. You can listen to others, but the final decision should be yours, because you are the one who will live with the consequences. Dependence removes this responsibility. Independence restores it. A person who makes their own decisions develops clarity. They understand what works for them. They learn from their experiences. They become stronger with time. More you depend on others for decisions, the more you lose control over your life. But the moment you start choosing for yourself, even in small ways, you begin to take that control back. Your life is shaped by your decisions, and your decisions should come from you. That is where true power lies. Chapter 6: Emotional Dependence and Loss of Inner Stability. One of the deepest forms of dependence is emotional dependence. It is not always visible like actions or decisions, but its impact is far stronger. Emotional dependence means your feelings are controlled by others. Your happiness, your sadness, your sense of worth, instead of coming from within. They depend on how others treat you. At first, this may feel normal, because humans naturally respond to others. But when this response becomes control, it turns into dependence. A young man named Saif always felt happy when his friends appreciated him. When they praised him, he felt confident and valued. But when they ignored him or did not respond, his mood changed completely. He felt insecure and unimportant. His emotions were not stable. They were controlled by others' behavior. This is emotional dependence. Another example is of a girl named Hina. Hina was in a close relationship where she relied on one person for emotional support. Whenever she felt stressed or confused, she would immediately turn to that person. At first, it felt comforting, but over time, she realized something. She could not handle her emotions alone. If that person was unavailable, she felt lost and overwhelmed. This shows how dependence weakens emotional strength, because true stability comes from within. When your emotions depend on someone else, you lose control over your inner state. A boy named Danish experienced this in a different way. He constantly checked his phone, waiting for messages from others. If he received attention, he felt happy. If there was silence, he felt anxious. As peace depended on external responses. This created constant tension, because he was always waiting, always expecting, and expectations often lead to disappointment. Emotional dependence also creates fear of losing people, fear of being ignored, fear of not being valued. This fear leads to over-attachment. A person becomes too involved, too invested. They begin to prioritize others' emotions over their own. A young woman named Komal always tried to keep everyone happy. She avoided conflict. She agreed, even when she disagreed. She believed this would maintain her relationships. But inside, she felt exhausted. She was neglecting her own feelings. This is the hidden cost of emotional dependence. You lose connection with yourself. Your focus shifts completely to others. Another important effect is the loss of self-worth. When your value depends on others' approval, it becomes unstable, because people are not consistent. Their moods change, their opinions change. If your worth is tied to them, it will keep changing. As well, a man named Fahim always needed validation from his colleagues. If they appreciated his work, he felt capable. If they criticized him, he felt like a failure. His confidence was not based on his abilities. It was based on others' opinions. This created insecurity, because external validation is temporary. Real confidence comes from self-acceptance. Emotional independence does not mean ignoring others. It means maintaining balance. You can care about people, you can value relationships, but your emotional stability should not depend on them. A student named Zara learned this over time. She started observing her reactions. She noticed how her mood changed based on others' behavior. Instead of reacting immediately, she began to pause. She asked herself why she felt a certain way. Slowly, she started managing her emotions. She became less reactive, more stable. This is the beginning of emotional independence. It requires awareness and practice. You must learn to sit with your feelings, to understand them, to handle them without immediate external support. Another important step is reducing expectations. You expect others to always respond in a certain way. You create dependency when expectations are not met. You feel hurt, but when you accept that people have their own lives, you reduce emotional pressure. Your stability improves. A person who is emotionally independent feels calm. They do not react strongly to every situation. They do not depend on constant validation. They understand their worth. Trust themselves. The more you depend on others emotionally, the more unstable your inner world becomes. But when you build emotional strength within yourself, you gain control. Your happiness becomes steady. Your mind becomes clear, and your relationships become healthier because they are based on choice, not need. True peace comes when your emotions are guided by your own understanding, not controlled by others. That is the foundation of real strength. Chapter 7. Breaking the pattern of dependence. Dependence does not disappear on its own. It is a pattern built over time through habits, thoughts, and repeated behavior. To break it, you must first accept that it exists. Without awareness, there is no change. Many people live their entire lives in dependence because they never question it. They believe it is normal. They believe they need others for everything. But the moment you recognize the pattern, you create the possibility of change. A young man named Wakas reached a point where he felt stuck in life. He noticed that every decision he made depended on others' opinions. Every step required approval. He felt frustrated and confused. One day he asked himself a simple question: what do I want? At first he had no answer. This showed him how deeply he had depended on others. This realization became the starting point of his change. Breaking dependence begins with small steps. It does not require a sudden transformation. It requires consistent effort. A girl named Miriam decided to take control of her daily choices. She started with simple things: what to wear, how to spend her time, what activities to pursue. At first she felt unsure. She questioned her own decisions, but she continued. With each choice, her confidence grew. This shows that independence is built gradually. Another important step is learning to sit with discomfort. Dependence often feels comfortable because it removes responsibility. When you start making your own decisions, you may feel fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Boy named Sakib experienced this when he tried to break his habit of asking others for advice. The first few times he made decisions alone, he felt anxious. He worried about making mistakes, but he reminded himself that mistakes are part of learning. Over time, the discomfort reduced confidence. Replaced fear. Breaking dependence also requires setting boundaries when you are used to relying on others. May also be used to controlling or guiding you. Changing this dynamic is not easy. A young woman named Hor realized that her friend always made decisions for her instead of following silently. She started expressing her own choices. At first her friend was surprised there was resistance, but Hor remained firm. Slowly, the balance in their relationship changed. This shows that independence requires courage. You must be willing to face resistance. Another key step is reducing the need for constant validation. A man named Imshiz used to share every idea with others. Before acting on it, needed approval to feel confident. One day he decided to act without seeking validation. He took a small step based on his own judgment. The result was not perfect, but it gave him a sense of control. He realized that he did not need approval for every action. This understanding helped him grow. Breaking the pattern also involves changing your mindset. Instead of thinking I need others to decide, you start thinking I can figure this out. This shift is powerful because it builds self-trust. A student named Liba practiced this by solving her own problems first. Before asking for help, she tried to find solutions. Even if she struggled, this effort strengthened her thinking ability. She became more confident in handling challenges. Another important aspect is accepting responsibility. Dependence often allows people to avoid responsibility if others make decisions. They also carry the blame. But independence requires ownership. A person must accept both success and failure. Young man named Gibran learned this when he made an important decision on his own. Outcome was not what he expected. Instead of blaming others, he accepted the result. He learned from it. This experience made him stronger. Breaking dependence is not about isolating yourself. It is about creating balance. You can still seek advice. You can still connect with others, but you do not rely on them completely. The difference is control. Your life remains in your hands. Process takes time. There will be moments of doubt, moments of fear, but each step forward builds strength. Every independent decision, every moment of self-trust brings you closer to your true self. Dependence is a habit. Independence is a skill, and like every skill, it improves with practice. The moment you start breaking the pattern, you begin to take back control of your life. And that is where real freedom begins. Chapter 8. Building self-trust. After breaking the pattern of dependence, the next step is building self-trust. Self-trust is the foundation of independence. Without it, a person easily falls back into old habits. When you trust yourself, you do not constantly look for approval. You do not feel lost when others are not there. You do not doubt every decision you make. Instead, you rely on your own understanding. But self-trust is not something that appears instantly. It is built slowly through experience. A young man named Hamdan struggled with trusting himself. He had spent years depending on others for decisions. Even after deciding to change, he still felt unsure whenever he made a choice. He questioned it again and again. He wondered if others would have chosen differently. This doubt is common in the beginning because the mind is not used to independence. To overcome this, Hamdan started taking small steps. He made simple decisions without asking anyone. He chose how to spend his day. He managed his time. He solved small problems on his own. At first, the results were not perfect, but each decision taught him something. Slowly, his confidence began to grow. This is how self-trust is built, through action and experience. Another example is of a girl named Ayman. Ayman used to depend on her friends for emotional support. Whenever she felt confused, she immediately reached out to them. After realizing her dependence, she decided to handle her emotions on her own first. When she felt stressed, she took time to understand her feelings. She wrote down her thoughts. She reflected on her situation. Only after that did she talk to others if needed. This practice made her emotionally stronger. She learned that she could handle her feelings. This is an important step in building self-trust, believing that you are capable. Self-trust also comes from accepting mistakes. Many people do not trust themselves because they fear making wrong decisions. They believe that mistakes mean failure, but in reality, mistakes are part of growth. A boy named Salman once made a decision that did not work out well. At first, he felt regret. He thought he should have asked others, but instead of returning to dependence, he chose to learn from the experience. He analyzed what went wrong. He understood his mistake. This process gave him knowledge. The next time he faced a similar situation, he made a better decision. This is how mistakes build self-trust. They provide lessons. Another important factor is consistency. Self-trust grows when you repeatedly rely on yourself. Young woman named Noreen practiced this daily. She set small goals and completed them on her own. Even simple tasks like managing her schedule, completing her work without reminders. Each completed task strengthened her belief in herself. Over time, this consistency created confidence. She no longer felt the need to depend on others. Self-trust also requires honesty with yourself. You must understand your strengths and your weaknesses. Without this understanding, your confidence becomes unrealistic. A man named Rasa learned this through experience. He tried to take on responsibilities beyond his ability. When he failed, he felt discouraged. Later, he realized that self-trust is not about believing you can do everything. It is about knowing what you can do and improving step by step. This awareness helped him grow steadily. Another key aspect is patience. Building self-trust takes time. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, moments when you feel unsure, but these moments are part of the process. A student named Adil faced this while preparing for an important decision. He felt uncertain and confused. Instead of rushing, he gave himself time. He gathered information. He thought carefully. Then he made his choice. This patience allowed him to trust his decision. Self-trust also changes how you view others' opinions. You still listen, but you do not depend. You consider advice. But the final decision remains yours. This balance is important because it keeps you open to learning. While maintaining independence, a person who trusts themselves becomes stable. They do not change their direction based on every opinion. They do not seek constant approval. They move forward with clarity. The more you trust yourself, the less you need to depend on others. Your confidence becomes internal. Your strength becomes consistent, and your identity becomes clear. Building self-trust is one of the most powerful steps in personal growth, because once you believe in yourself, you stop losing yourself in others. You start living as your true self, and that is where real strength and freedom exist. Chapter 9, Healthy Relationships without losing your self-independence does not mean cutting yourself off from others. It does not mean living in isolation or rejecting relationships. Humans are naturally social. Connection is a part of life. The key difference lies in how you connect. You can be connected without being dependent. You can care without losing yourself. This is what defines a healthy relationship. Healthy relationship is not based on need. It is based on choice. Two individuals come together, not because they cannot live alone, but because they choose to share their lives. A young man named Asen learned this after years of dependence. He used to rely heavily on his friends for decisions and emotional support, but after working on himself, he became more independent. When he returned to his friendships, something felt different. He no longer felt the need to follow. He expressed his own thoughts. He made his own choices, and surprisingly, his relationships improved because now they were based on equality. Another example is of a girl named Kiran. Kiran used to depend on one person for everything: her happiness, her decisions, her emotional support. This created pressure in the relationship. Other person felt responsible for her stability. Over time, this caused imbalance and stress. After understanding her dependence, Kiran started building her own strength. She learned to manage her emotions. She began making her own decisions. When she continued the relationship, it became healthier. There was space. There was respect. There was balance. This shows that independence strengthens relationships. It does not weaken. Theme: a healthy relationship allows freedom. Each person has their own identity, their own thoughts, their own goals. They support each other, but they do not control each other. A boy named Fahad and his friend Bilal had this kind of bond. They spent time together. They helped each other, but they also respected their individuality. If one disagreed, they expressed it openly. There was no fear of rejection. This created trust because honesty was valued more than approval. Another important aspect of healthy relationships is boundaries. Boundaries define what is acceptable and what is not. Without boundaries, dependence easily develops. A young woman named Saba realized that she always said yes to others, even when she was uncomfortable. She feared that saying no would damage her relationships, but this behavior made her feel exhausted. After learning about boundaries, she started expressing her limits. At first, it was difficult, but over time, people began to respect her more. Her relationships became stronger because they were based on honesty. Healthy relationships also do not require constant validation. When you are independent, you do not seek approval for every action. You share your thoughts, But you do not depend on agreement. A man named Usman experienced this change earlier. He needed others to agree with him, to feel confident, but after building self-trust, he became comfortable with differences. He understood that disagreement does not mean rejection. This made his interactions more mature. Another key element is emotional balance in a healthy relationship. You support each other emotionally, but you do not rely completely on the other person. A student named Hiba practiced this. When she felt stressed, she first tried to understand her emotions. She managed them on her own, and she shared with her friends. This created balance. She was not dependent, but she was still connected. Healthy relationships are built on respect for individuality, respect for choices, respect for boundaries. When respect exists, dependence does not grow because each person values their own identity and the identity of the other. A person who is independent brings strength into relationships. They do not seek constant reassurance. They do not fear being alone. They stay because they want to, not because they need to. This creates stability because the relationship is not based on fear or insecurity. It is based on understanding and mutual growth. The more independent you become, the healthier your relationships will be, because you are not losing yourself in them. You are adding value to them. Connection becomes a choice, not a necessity, and that is the true meaning of a strong relationship, where two complete individuals come together without losing who they are. That is balance. That is strength. That is freedom. Chapter 10, Finding Yourself Again. If you have spent years depending on others, feeling lost, questioning your own choices, or doubting your worth, it is important to remember one simple truth. You can always find yourself again. Rediscovery begins with awareness. First step is noticing where you have been dependent. Which decisions were truly yours? Which emotions were yours? Which choices were made to please others? A young woman named Liba realized she had spent years following friends and family. She rarely made decisions alone. She constantly sought approval. When she paused to reflect, she saw how much of herself had been hidden. This awareness was the starting point. The second step is spending time alone. Being alone is not a punishment. It is a tool for self-discovery. Boy named Asset had always avoided solitude. He was afraid of his own thoughts. But when he finally allowed himself to spend time alone, he began to understand what he truly wanted. He explored his interests. He reflected on his values. He identified his strengths and weaknesses. Time alone creates clarity. The third step is asking yourself the right questions. What do I want? What do I believe? What makes me happy? What are my priorities? A young woman named Hira wrote these questions in a journal. She answered honestly, even when the answers felt uncomfortable. Slowly, she began to reconnect with her true self. The fourth step is making independent choices. Start with small decisions. What to eat, how to spend your time, which activities to pursue. Then, gradually take bigger decisions. Career choices, relationships, long-term goals. Each choice strengthens your independence. A man named Salman practiced this step by choosing his own projects at work, even when others suggested different paths. He trusted his judgment, even when mistakes happened. He learned from them. Mistakes are part of rediscovery. They teach you who you are. They show you what works and what does not. Fifth step is reducing reliance on external validation. When you constantly seek approval, you lose connection with your inner voice. A girl named Kamal used to feel happy only when praised, but after building self-trust, she started acknowledging her own achievements. She learned to celebrate herself. This strengthened her identity. The sixth step is building habits that reinforce independence. Daily reflection, setting personal goals, practicing self-care, making decisions, managing emotions. Each habit slowly restores your confidence and clarity. A young man named Bilal created a routine where he planned his day independently. He reflected on decisions. He analyzed his emotions. Gradually, he felt more in control. The seventh step is patience rediscovery, does not happen overnight. A person who has been dependent for years cannot regain identity in days. It takes consistent effort. It takes reflection. It takes courage. A girl named Nita experienced frustration during her journey. She felt she was not progressing, but she continued over time. She felt stronger and more self-aware. The eighth step is embracing your uniqueness. You may have spent years adapting to others, comparing yourself, trying to fit in. Finding yourself again means acknowledging who you truly are, accepting your strengths and weaknesses, pursuing your passions. A young man named Hamza finally started painting even though others questioned his choice. He felt alive and authentic. The ninth step is choosing relationships wisely. Now that you understand yourself, you can engage in relationships without losing your identity. You stay connected because you want to, not because you need to. This creates balance and mutual respect. Final step is commitment. Rediscovering yourself requires dedication. You must commit to making choices that align with your values, to maintaining independence, to trusting yourself. A person who commits to this path gradually restores their identity. They regain clarity. They rebuild confidence. They reclaim their life. Finding yourself again is not just about independence. It is about freedom. Freedom to think, freedom to feel, freedom to act, freedom to live authentically. No matter how lost you feel, you can always start again. The journey may be challenging, but each step brings you closer to the most important person in your life, you. And when you truly find yourself, you gain not only independence, but strength, peace, and the power to live life on your own terms. Chapter 11. Sustaining independence and continuous growth. Reclaiming yourself is not a one-time achievement. Independence is a journey that requires continuous effort and conscious practice. Even after breaking patterns of dependence and building self-trust, a person may face situations that test their autonomy. Old habits may resurface during stress, uncertainty, or emotional vulnerability. The first step in sustaining independence is constant self-awareness. You must regularly check in with yourself. Ask questions such as, am I making this decision for myself? Or am I influenced by others? Am I feeling secure because of my own choices, or because someone else reassured me? Young woman named Sana realized that during exams she still relied on friends' opinions for study strategies, even though she had become more independent in other areas of life. By noticing this pattern, she was able to gradually correct it and strengthen her self-reliance. Second step is building resilience. Independence comes with responsibility. Decisions, mistakes, and failures are now yours to face. Rather than fearing them, see them as opportunities to learn and grow. A man named Amir started his own business. Initially, he constantly compared himself with competitors and sought advice at every step. Over time, he learned to trust his instincts and accept outcomes even when mistakes happened. He reflected and improved. This resilience reinforced his independence. Third step is nurturing emotional intelligence. Even independent people need connection and support, but emotional intelligence allows you to engage without losing yourself. You can empathize and share without becoming dependent. A student named Ariba practiced this by supporting friends through challenges. She listened and advised, but she did not let their moods dictate her own emotions. Her relationships became more balanced and fulfilling. Fourth step is continuous personal growth. Independence thrives when you keep learning, develop skills, explore passions, and challenge your comfort zone. The more competent and self-aware you become, the less you rely on external validation. For example, a young man named Bilo took up learning new languages and problem-solving skills. These achievements boosted his confidence and reduced his emotional dependence on peers and family. Fifth step is surrounding yourself with healthy influences. Independence does not mean avoiding people. It means choosing connections that respect boundaries and encourage growth. Supportive relationships enhance your strength without creating reliance. A woman named Hina reassessed her friendships. She focused on friends who inspired her to be better while respecting her individuality. She distanced herself from relationships that encouraged conformity or control. The sixth step is practicing gratitude and self-acknowledgement. Independent people celebrate their achievements, both big and small. Acknowledging your progress reinforces self-trust and reduces the need for constant external approval every day. Remind yourself of decisions made, challenges faced, and lessons learned. This builds a resilient mindset that sustains independence. Seventh step is patience and persistence. Growth is never linear. There will be setbacks. Old habits may reappear. External pressures may tempt you to rely on others, but persistence strengthens character. Every moment you choose yourself over dependence reinforces freedom. Every decision made with awareness strengthens your identity. Sustaining independence is not about perfection. It is about conscious effort, learning from mistakes, and remaining true to yourself. It is a lifelong practice of balancing connection with autonomy, care with self-responsibility, and growth with self-acceptance. A person who masters this balance experiences peace. They navigate life confidently. They maintain healthy relationships, and they remain grounded in their identity. No matter the challenges, independence is not a destination. It is a continuous journey, and the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Your life becomes a reflection of your true self, strong, resilient, and free. Chapter 12. The power of self-reflection. Self-reflection is one of the most powerful tools for maintaining independence and understanding yourself. It allows you to examine your thoughts, emotions, and actions. It shows you where dependence might still exist. It reveals habits, fears, and patterns that quietly influence your decisions. A young woman named Miriam discovered the importance of reflection after realizing she still sought approval from her friends. She started journaling daily, writing down her choices, her emotions, and the reasons behind her actions. Over time, she began to notice moments when she made decisions based on her own judgment and moments when she relied on others. This awareness helped her adjust her behavior and build stronger self-trust. Self-reflection also helps identify triggers for dependence. Stress, fear, insecurity, and uncertainty often push people back into old habits. By reflecting on these triggers, you can prepare yourself to respond differently. A man named Imran noticed that he felt anxious whenever he faced criticism previously. He would seek reassurance immediately. Through self-reflection, he realized the anxiety came from relying too much on others for validation. Once he understood this, he developed strategies to manage his emotions independently. Another benefit of self-reflection is clarity in relationships. By reflecting on your interactions, you can see where boundaries are respected and where dependence is creeping. A student named Hina reflected on her friendships and realized that some friends unintentionally pressured her to conform. This awareness allowed her to communicate her needs and maintain her independence while preserving valuable relationships. Reflection also strengthens decision-making. By reviewing past choices and understanding what influenced them, you can identify patterns of dependence. You begin to notice which decisions were truly yours and which were influenced by others. This understanding empowers you to make better, more confident choices in the future. The process of reflection is simple, but requires consistency. Set aside time each day or week to ask yourself questions like, did I make this decision for myself or someone else? Did I feel anxious or pressured by someone else's opinion? Am I acting based on my values and priorities? Answer honestly, even when it feels uncomfortable. Self-reflection is not about judgment. It is about awareness and growth. Another practical tool is journaling. Writing your thoughts clarifies them. It helps you see patterns you might otherwise ignore. Over time, you begin to understand your motivations, desires, and boundaries more deeply. Meditation and quiet contemplation are also effective. Even a few minutes of focused thought allows you to observe your mind. You can notice when dependence arises and consciously choose to act differently. Reflection also strengthens emotional independence. By observing your reactions, you understand why certain situations trigger strong emotions. Instead of immediately reacting or seeking reassurance, you can pause, assess, and respond in alignment with your values. A young man named Saad practiced reflection before responding to stressful messages. He noticed his initial urge to seek approval or defend himself. By pausing and reflecting, he responded calmly, preserving his independence and self-respect. Finally, self-reflection cultivates long-term growth. Independence is not a one-time achievement. It is maintained through awareness, conscious choices, and continuous learning. The more you reflect, the more in tune you become with your inner voice, the more aligned your actions are with your true self. Self-reflection is the bridge between recognizing dependence and sustaining independence. It allows you to navigate life with clarity, confidence, and authenticity. Through reflection, you reclaim not just your decisions and emotions, but the essence of who you are. The practice may be challenging at first. It may uncover uncomfortable truths, but each moment of honest reflection strengthens your self-trust, your identity, and your freedom, and in the end, it empowers you to live a life guided by your own values, choices, and inner wisdom. Fully independent, fully yourself. Conclusion: reclaiming yourself from dependence. Dependence is a silent force that shapes our thoughts, emotions, and actions without us realizing it. It begins subtly, disguised as care, friendship, or support. But over time, it slowly erodes our identity, weakens our confidence, and limits our potential. Whether it is relying on others for decisions, emotions, validation, or guidance, dependence keeps us from discovering our true selves and living authentically. The journey to independence begins with awareness, recognizing where we have allowed ourselves to rely too heavily on others, continues through deliberate actions, making decisions on our own, facing the discomfort of solitude, trusting ourselves, and learning from mistakes. Each step, no matter how small, strengthens self-reliance and builds the foundation of confidence and clarity. Building self-trust is crucial, because without it, old patterns of dependence can easily return. Self-trust grows through consistent effort, reflection, and accepting responsibility for both successes and failures. Emotional independence ensures that our happiness and peace are guided from within rather than being controlled by the actions, opinions of others. Independence does not mean isolation. Healthy relationships thrive when both individuals maintain their identity, respect boundaries, and support each other without creating reliance. Choosing connection consciously rather than out of need allows us to engage fully while remaining strong and grounded. Finally, rediscovering yourself is a process of patience, courage, and commitment. It requires embracing your uniqueness, making your own choices, and dedicating yourself to living life according to your values rather than external expectations. The moment you reclaim your inner voice, your decisions, and your emotional stability, you unlock freedom, the freedom to live authentically, the freedom to grow, and the freedom to become the strongest version of yourself. Dependence may weaken, but independence empowers. Life is most fulfilling when you stand on your own. Trust yourself and honor your true identity. Every choice you make for yourself, every step you take alone, brings you closer to who you are always meant to be: a person fully aware, fully capable, and fully free. Then,
Kindly subscribe to my channel.